Hey, we're live.
Okay, number five. Number 10, 10x.
It's live.
Alive, I
Yes.
think.
Okay. You think it's live? It's telling me it's going to YouTube. Hey,
Okay.
everybody. Happy Saturday. Simon and I woke up this morning and decided that we were unstoppable and that we wanted to come and hang out with you and talk about it a little bit this morning. So, where's everybody? Hey, Simon, how are you?
Amazing. Yeah, thank you. Feeling unstoppable right
Yeah,
now.
feeling very unstoppable.
Yeah.
So, listen, guys, we've got a fun question. Monique is always framing things as fun because she gets just a little bit amped up. Actually, I want to ask you, have you ever felt like maybe you weren't being listened to? That you have these ideas that you want to communicate, things that you think, and either people aren't taking you seriously or you don't feel like they're really listening. And in particular, sometimes the adults in our life, our parents, guardians, coaches, teachers, have you ever had that feeling? Maybe have you, Simon, where it's like you're not really sure they're listening or taking you seriously, your ideas? Is that
Big
something you
time.
do too?
Yeah, big time.
Okay, awesome. Because I'm kind of counting on you to, help us think about a context where this kind of comes up.
No worries.
Got it.
So, what I think of when you say that is is along the lines of opening your mouth and talking, having a voice.
Mhm.
And this is this is a subject which is very dear to my heart. And one of my coachees that I remember her story quite clearly. Um, she was caught in a in an activity, like doing an activity that her mum and dad wanted her to do. And she felt like even though she'd, told them like 100 times that she maybe wasn't that interested in in what she was doing, what was going on. Well, they have their own ideas about their own, motivation, their own clear objectives for why she should be doing that activity. Now, I think I've talked about this story before, but I'll repeat it again because it's a good one. And she was actually kind of stuck in karate classes, and rightfully so, I suppose, from their parent angle, their parent perspective. Young girl, 9, 10 years old. They want her to grow up in this unsafe world and knowing how to, defend herself, how to, if she's, all this fear which gets put into newspapers about, this, that, and the other, then they wanted to know that their daughter could look after herself. And not only look after herself, but along with karate, there's a whole bunch of discipline aspects and a whole load of things which can be very appealing to parents, thinking that their child is being taught some good values and qualities. So, with regards to not being listened to, I think what we can go on to talk about, Monique, in this episode, or one of the things potentially that if we go down this avenue and you'd like to, we could go on and talk about it, is how kids might actually be able to set themselves up for having honest discussions with their parents about things. And in doing so, being able to, follow more of their inspiration. Sorry, the kids' own, inspiration about, things that creative ideas which they have, things which they'd like to do, instead of just kind of, as we do quite a lot of the time as children, as we do, we just kind of like try and fit in. We just kind of, we're used to having, kind of teachers and parents who kind of seem to be kind of like up here and we're down here and we're kind of like taking these instructions all the time. Now, hopefully, your mum and dad aren't watching this or your teacher, because I'm going to say some things potentially which is going to start giving you more control in your life, which is going to start giving you more of a voice, which is going to start enabling you to be able to express yourself.
Mhm.
And yeah, so that's one aspect of things that how did you phrase it? That you wish grown-ups would listen to more. No, what was your exact phrasing of that?
Yeah, I said, well, actually, I didn't say that, but I think that's a great way to ask the question. I said, have you ever felt like perhaps you weren't being listened to or you weren't being heard, that you're
Right.
taken seriously?
Yeah.
But, another way to ask that is, what is it that you wish that the adults in your life or that grown-ups would listen to?
Mm.
Your
Yeah.
perspective, you wish they would listen to.
Yeah.
And as kids get older and as we become teens and even older young people, that's something that we encounter,
Mm.
that we feel like, they don't understand how important this is to me, or at least that's what we tell ourselves, right? Like that may be what we believe. So
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
helpful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So in this case, I have kind of two different ways of looking at it, and one is very, personal to you about the things that you're doing, maybe activities that you're doing, or um, you, subjects that you want to take, or things that you want to do, extracurricular activities, or places where you want to go and hang out, and I don't know, just stuff like that. But another way of looking at it is also that it might be that you see in your eyes in the world, um, you know, problems that need solving. And they could be, big things like, Greta Thunberg,
Yeah.
and yeah, the environmental girl,
Mm-hmm.
who, you know, started started that movement, environmental movement for kids. It can be big ideas like that you're like, hey, you can see real problems occurring, wars happening in the world and things like that going on. And maybe you have some, real ideas about, how you can actually, start to help with things like that. And you know, when you have your creative ideas and your creative ideas and solutions, which you might, want to be exploring and presenting and talking about, because it's only when you start kind of talking about these things and getting them out in the open that you can really kind of start feeling your way through these kind of like big issues and sorting it out in your own head, even, before trying to make any impact in the world. But you know, yeah. So that's like the second way of looking at it. The first one is very personal. The second one is what's problems in the outside world that I'd like to be, helping with and finding solutions for and solving. So yeah, what's coming up for you there, Monique?
Oh, I like your point that there are sometimes, well, so here's one thing I'll say. Okay. When I was a kid, Simon, I probably was not the generation where kids were expected to be seen and not heard and to speak when they were spoken to. I was born in the 70s, growing up in the 80s, but I definitely was being parented and taken care of by adults who had been raised in the generation where kids were expected to be quiet and stay in their space. I do have the experience that very different than today. Like, you as a child, you weren't even often able to know what was going on with adults because you were not in the spaces where adults were having conversations so that you could hear the adult perspectives.
Hmm.
But in the rare instances that you were in the same spaces with adults, there was like this spoken and unspoken kind of division where we just understood as kids that we were not supposed to be weighing in and presenting our ideas and kind of interjecting what we think needs to happen. We got to keep those ideas to ourselves. We got to keep them quiet. So I can absolutely identify with your point about sometimes on a personal level, it's like, if you think about it, has anyone even asked you what you wanted or whether or not you like something, or were you just presented the options, already? Um, I think as we get older, we start to ask ourselves and we start to think about whether or not we agree or wish for different outcomes than the ones that we see. I love that you talk about the things that are going on in our personal life, like activities that we do, the kinds of foods that we eat, whether or not the decorations in our room are blue or pink, that kind of thing, versus things that we may have thoughts about. Simon, we've both worked with a lot of children, but I spent 24 years working in elementary school, and I've always been just mesmerized by the kids who had these really big visions, thoughts, and ideas about the world, not kid stuff. Like they really very passionately, not forced by their parents. Like I've had conferences with the parents that were like, we don't know where this comes from. This is just something that the kid genuinely cares about. I've always been impressed by that. And I personally felt like encouraging those kids, to practice the strategies to have their voices be heard. Because a child might be surprised to know, and a young person might be surprised to know that even adults like you and I still have times where we feel like our ideas aren't being listened to. It's really not even so much a kid thing or a young person thing as much as it is a human thing. And I would love to just discuss some of the things that maybe you and I both think that young people can do when they have ideas or perspectives that they think aren't really being listened to or taken seriously, that might help them gain the attention that they desire from, their parents or teachers or whomever it is that they want to express their ideas to. I
Love
think that
that.
could.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to start or should I go first?
Yeah, you go first.
Cool. Well, we can maybe to kind of chop and change, and I've
Let's
got a couple of ideas on there. So with regards to a couple of things which you were talking about there, and a couple of things which have just come up. Uh, you came up with the food that we eat. That's a really good one because how
Yeah.
many kids just sit down at tea time and how many of you guys just sit down at tea time and you're just like, oh gosh, not liking, 90% of what's on your plate. And the automatic kind of default action there, or the default things to say is, oh God, not that again, or, oh, I hate that, or, this, that, and the other. And so we can now practice how, because when we say things like that, all we're going to do is we're sorry, we are probably only just going to get our mom and dad's back up because they've spent, X amount of time as a busy parent, making dinner. And we've now told them that we don't like it. You feel bad. They feel bad. And anyway, it can just get into spiral into a bit of an argument or a bit of a bit of a mess. And so all you need to do is flip it like we've talked about before and just think about what you can actually do or what you can actually suggest as a more empowering way of looking at it, or more empowering solution. And I suppose the same goes with this with when we were talking about the activities that you're doing, and just generally about taking a little bit more control of the rudder about where your life's going. And with regards to food, what you can do then is, you can actually go and this is just a for example, you could find your own way, but a more empowering way of looking at it would be, what can I do to, get something that I like on the plate, that's good and healthy for everybody and the whole family. Well, I can go and kind of like start looking at recipes, so just holding back when, that plate goes on the table, of complaining or, saying that you don't like what's there and getting people's back up, etc. But afterwards, actually finding out what you do like and maybe just looking at some recipes, and afterwards, you could actually find some stuff and just go up to whoever does all the cooking in your house. Maybe it's one or the other, maybe it's both, or maybe one might be a bit more approachable than others. I don't know, with regards to this aspect of food. But you can just go up to them with, there's tons of stuff online. In fact, I know there's like a whole website for kids, to do cooking of recipes and stuff. And you can actually just take it up and say, look, hey, I really like the look of this one. How would you like to, do some cooking with me in the kitchen? And actually offer to, help out. And I will more or less guarantee you guys, and I think Monique will back me up on this one, that if you went to any parent and asked them that, they would love to get you into the kitchen and get you involved and get you like chopping a few vegetables and doing a whatever, and that way you can start influencing the food that's coming out onto the table. So that's one thing. I've got plenty more ideas, but yeah, I'll toss it back over to you. Toss the ball back over to you, Monique, and
Yeah, so Simon,
you give
first of
one.
all, that story, that like reference is so good because that actually is exactly what happened in my house. Of
Hmm.
course, being the adult in our family in charge of what we have for dinner, doing the shopping, doing the cooking. My kids ate what they were offered because, I was maybe not offering them the options. And sometimes they would come to the table a little bit grumpy. And my answer would be a little bit like a lecture about, I took the time to make this food and you're complaining about it. And that doesn't make me happy, right? So we've had that exact exchange. But what I will tell you shifted was my kids being first willing to help with the food. And as I started to see them interested in helping with the food, then when they had ideas about different foods that they would like to try helping to make or even making on their own, now that they have the ability to do that, I found myself a lot more open because it was not like they were asking me to do something I didn't want to do. They were asking to do something that they were interested in. So
Right.
both of my kids have actually done this. They have very unique taste, one likes more junk foody cheese sticks and, fancy burgers and whatever. And the other one likes more soups and stews and things with vegetables. But either
Yeah.
way, the things that they're interested in, I would never make.
Mhm.
It just wouldn't even be something that I'm interested in. What I will say is exactly what you described, is how they both got the opportunity to be trusted in the kitchen, to make things. And now we're at the point, they're teens, where they can say, when you shop, can you buy this, that, or the other thing? And I'm like, yeah, no problem. I'll just put it on the list. So I love that.
Wow. Love
And what I
that.
pull out of that and sort of shift and apply it to another context for these guys listening is, we don't get, and Simon, you talked about this, but I want to just transition into something else. We think that when we have a negative reaction to something that we're presented with, that giving the negative reaction is going to make them see how upset we are and want to change and see our perspective. But actually, it has the opposite result.
Yeah.
When we
Yeah.
give a negative response, it just makes the other person have a negative response. They're resistant, they're not open to hearing your perspective. So the whine, the pout, the complain, it doesn't actually help. But if you can find a way to engage positively with the other person's perspective, see the value in what they're trying to offer. Simon, what you just talked about was, you said maybe kids can just understand that their parents are looking for healthy dinners and they're doing it their way, right? So when a kid says, oh, mom, I saw this other healthy option and it has broccoli. we never eat broccoli. I would love to try it, right? Like I just made that up. Maybe no kid wants broccoli. So the broccoli isn't the focus. But my point is taking this positive approach to finding an alternative as a suggestion instead of a negative approach is a really powerful strategy to use when you want other people to consider your ideas. And now I want to shift to a totally different kind of example, because Simon and I have experienced this as adults in work. Very often we have been parts of teams of people who collaborate in an office or, you know, at a particular organization or company, and we have work to do. And very often we have differences of ideas. And I know kids, you've worked in groups with your peers at school on projects, or occasionally you have tasks that you need to accomplish with your siblings. Or maybe even thinking about some of the big things that Simon mentioned that we care about in the world. We can definitely feel like it's difficult to get people to agree with us that the idea that we have is important, that it's good, that it's worthy of attention. So I would like to suggest that the strategy to use when you want to develop people's interest in something is exactly the same thing that we just talked about with the food. First of all, start instead of with, you know, poo-pooing other people's ideas and having a negative response to theirs, to be accepting and in agreement with what it is that they desire, and keeping that same open, positive attitude when you're finding opportunities to share your perspective, because you're more likely to get their interest and agreement that way. The other thing that I want to say is that when you find that you're a person who has maybe unique thoughts, or your ideas are different than what everybody else is thinking, and you want them to give attention to it, sometimes you need to be willing, and I'm just going to use a big word right here, to commit to that message. Like, don't just give up because mom and dad said no to your suggestion that one time. Mm-hmm. Like, if it's important to you, you're going to need to explore, stay committed to the idea and explore it. And here's what I mean by explore it. Why would your parents be interested in it? What would be a benefit that they would see? You're telling them your perspective and you want them to see your perspective. One way that you could help them to do that is to understand theirs. So think like mom and dad for a second. They want you to be safe, like in the karate example. They want you to learn self-defense. Maybe you need to understand that those are like priorities for them, that they're concerned about your safety and well-being. So maybe it would be helpful for them if the thing that you're interested in, you started to highlight or point out or share with them how it might serve some of the purposes that they're interested in. Because all of us humans are kind of showing up thinking about what we're thinking. We want what we want. And if you put any 3 or 4 of us in a circle, everybody wants something, everybody's thinking something. And the best way to get everybody's interest in things is to make sure that we just consider what the other people want instead of just what we want. So that might be kind of a little too, broad a way to speak about this, but it can be useful to think about why the other people around you would be interested in your idea. How would it help them? How would it connect to something that they already think is important? That can sometimes help to get people to be interested in the things that we're onto, that perhaps aren't automatically, grabbing their interest, so that maybe they'd be willing to try it with us or give us the space to do it on our own if that's what we choose. Kind of not loving the way I described that, Simon, but I do think it's a good suggestion.
No, I love it. So I think in summary, we're basically saying that the best way to perhaps influence and change what's going on is by first having a clear idea yourself of another creative alternative. Because that was the point of what we were making, was that if you just turn up and say, well, I don't like that, adults, people generally don't want to hear that. They go, okay, so you don't like that. So what do you like? And you're like, oh, well, yeah, I don't know, something else. And, if you're completely unspecific about what you actually do want, then it's going to be very, very difficult to change people's ideas or views or opinions. So you first have to get clear with some other creative ideas of your own to be able to present. So I'm feeling like a little, um, I'm feeling like a bit of a challenge coming on here,
You
buddy.
have an idea for a challenge, Simon? You
What
feel it?
about you?
Are you feeling the challenge or should I be feeling?
Yeah, well, you know how much we love a good challenge.
We do love a good challenge.
So it's a very easy one this week, guys. A few ideas I think will probably have not have come up already. Just listening to the show, or if they haven't, either listen to it again, or you can just sit down and just reflect on it for yourself, or even go into your journal and start drawing about it, or writing some just writing with your pen about it. But things which you kind of things around you that you don't feel that your voice is being heard, that you're feeling like a bit boxed in somewhere in your life about something, and you don't quite feel like you've got the influence to be able to change it. What we want you to do is to flip it now. Is to flip it, and instead of complaining, instead of just looking at all the negatives of what's going on with the circumstance or the other person or what's going on, then you flip it and you start becoming creative and you start looking for your own ideas and your own solutions, and you you know talk about them with
Mhm.
whoever it is. Now, as part one of the challenge this week, you don't necessarily have to build up the courage to, move into talk about it and presenting it, because we were talking first about coming up with some creative ideas. It might take you a little bit of time. It might take you a little bit of research to, find a website, or, go onto YouTube and find some, good training videos on cooking or whatever. Or it might take you a little bit of time to find an alternative activity. If you feel like you're in the wrong activity and you'd rather be doing something else, well, you might be stuck in football and want to go and do karate, but you're not actually aware that there's any karate clubs around you. You might have to do like a little bit of research before you come and present your creative solutions to whoever it is, your teacher or your parent, or this could just be talking about it with a friend. It doesn't matter, guys. So that's the challenge this week, is first of all just thinking about something in your life and thinking about creative ways in which you can start looking for alternatives or solutions. How does that sound as a challenge,
I think
Monique?
that sounds like a beautiful next step to to work toward finding the positivity that helps us get our ideas heard by the
Mm.
people in our lives. I love that.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe the next show, or a couple of shows down the road, then we'll start talking about how we can really start getting our voice heard, become courageous, and move our ideas out into the world and start discussing them, and making a little bit of impact, and making a bit of uh, taking our life forward in the way that we want to be taking it forward. But yeah, in the meantime, that's your challenge for this week, guys. And just the same as always, guys, we know that if you are taking steps forward, no matter how small, then you're being unstoppable. It's only when we give up that that we move into any kind of realms of failure or whatever. But taking those small steps forward, no matter how small, is making you unstoppable, guys. So have a great week, and we will see you next Saturday.
Saturday, everybody. Bye bye.